and to be fully transparent, this took me even some time to kind of get over because I was always, I went to college for marketing and I learned about how important it is for brand awareness. And I'm not at all, poo pooing brand awareness. It's very, very important, especially from a thought leadership side. And so, one of the things I would often talk about if I'm especially working with just the marketing departments is getting the marketing team to think like sales. So, instead of again, how can we, broaden our brand awareness? Instead is if we produce this, marketing asset like a content piece, how is it going to help move the lead to generate a conversation?
Welcome to Social Pulse Podcast B2B Edition, your dedicated source for mastering B2B social media marketing challenges authentically. I'm your host, Mike Galton, and in each episode, we dive deep into the complex world of B2B marketing, from effective content creation to strategic social selling, sharing insights and strategies you can use right away. Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome back to Social Pulse Podcast B2B Edition, where each and every week we're talking to marketing professionals like you, going through many of the same struggles you're going through and sharing their stories. Subscribe to find in each episode the inspiration, the motivation, and the perspiration that go into growing and scaling organizations like yours. Now, have you ever sat in a meeting where your marketing team proudly presented their latest social media metrics, the growing followers, the increasing engagement rates, only to have your sales team ask, but where are the qualified leads? It's a scene playing out in B2B companies everywhere. Marketing teams investing significant time and resources into social media while sales teams question the actual business value. The disconnect between social media activity and revenue generation has become one of the most challenging pain points for modern B2B organizations. But what if your social media strategy could do more than just generate likes and shares? What if it could become a genuine revenue driving machine that both marketing and sales teams celebrate? Well, that's exactly what we're exploring today with our guest, Jay Feitlinger. Jay is the founder of StringCan Interactive, a leading B2B marketing agency that's helped countless organizations bridge the gap between marketing efforts and revenue generation. As a seasoned entrepreneur and digital marketing strategist, Jay has spoken at major conferences and has become known for his practical, revenue-focused approach to digital marketing. His work has transformed how businesses view social media, turning it from a cost center into a profit center. With over a decade of experience helping B2B companies align their marketing and sales efforts, Jay brings a wealth of knowledge about creating social media strategies that actually drive revenue. Hey, Jay, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me.
So glad you could join us here. There's so much that I want to unpack with you today, but I would love if you could just first tell us when you began to realize that the traditional approach to social media metrics just weren't serving those B2B companies that you were working with.
Well, I guess to give it some context, I've been now in the space for, my gosh, 25 years. I'm kind of a dinosaur. And, I've seen it all. I did actually start out working in the traditional marketing space doing, TV ads, outside signage and that kind of stuff. And so I experienced early on, this question you're asking where, organizations were focusing so heavily around the traditional side and they're thinking about, brand awareness, and not really thinking about pipeline growth. And that's what I've learned over the years. And what got me so excited about getting into digital about maybe, I don't know, 18 or so years ago is that they don't care about awareness if it's not driving the deals. And so my my plan I've had for many years now is trying to find a really creative way to help better align the marketing and sales team so everyone's helping each other and focusing on the activities we do in marketing having some kind of connection to revenue. So rather than going from a brand building focus, it's going to a revenue driving focus, all about supporting, pipeline movement. And so I found that, thinking about it from that point of view, obviously, leadership, C-suite loves those kind of conversations. But then I think also it does open up the eyes not only to the marketing team, but also the sales team, again, how we can work better together.
I was relating very hard because I don't know if I've shared on this particular show or not, but I used to be the IT manager or a sales manager for an IT company a couple of decades ago. And so just like you, I was doing, digital or not digital at all, but it was outdoor advertising, radio spots. And gee, are we just throwing money away? Because who knows? It's that old axiom. I know half my advertising works. I just don't know which half. right? And so I love this approach that you've taken on focusing on actually driving revenue. So I wonder, to help illustrate what we're talking about, if you could share a specific example of a company where you've transformed their social media strategy from focusing on the vanity metrics that are just so common today to actually driving revenue.
Yeah, so let me give you one. I'm not going to name the company. I'm sure that the CMO probably wouldn't appreciate that, but I bet he's listening to this. And so I'll just kind of give you a little bit of context about the organization. The area that we specialize in obviously is doing only business to business client support. And so with that, from a social media perspective, as you obviously get, the LinkedIn discussion is a very, very common one. So what happened with this organization, they were or they are a large B2B healthcare company focusing more on the diagnostic side. And so their marketing team was quite, I would say, obsessed with LinkedIn engagement rates. So how many followers did we get? All that kind of stuff. And so in our initial conversation with some of their leadership team members, the focus I noticed, again, this happens to me, our team all the time, where they're like, what can we do to get, more followers and connections and that kind of stuff. And I decided to help them kind of flip the script and think about it more of less about getting followers and more about interacting with your target accounts and think about it from a sales enablement perspective. And then basically with that, both the marketing and the sales team should then be thinking about what can they do to deliver value to help improve that engagement. Which again, I think, when you put it from the perspective of sales, it's all about relationships. And so I think that from a sales team, they get that immediately where they're, nurturing opportunities to have those human interactions. And I don't understand why, for especially marketers, we don't think about what we do in the same way. And so with this client, again, it took a little bit of convincing because, again, I think most organizations, the larger you are, those vanity metrics are really hard to not focus on because obviously it's, and once in a while it feels good to pat yourself on the back that, we got a additional 400, followers this past week. And so with that client, we focused heavily on building the strategy for them and really understanding their, ICP, their ideal client profile, and then built out a content strategy around, okay, now how can we really improve the engagement we have with your ideal targets to help, push them down the funnel. And in that client situation, again, it took probably a good solid 8 or 9 months to kind of get everyone aligned and doing it the right way, and they had over a 40% increase in sales qualified leads from LinkedIn. And so, and then with that, because the leads came in so already highly engaged, they had, I think, about a 30% improvement in how they were moving deals through the actual pipeline. And so, obviously the sales team was super excited about that because it required a lot less, that trying to warm up the lead discussions, and they earned the trust quicker from those prospects. But then obviously the marketing team got pretty excited because now they found a really creative way to use this one, tactic to help better align again their team and then the sales team. So it's one, we have a lot of examples like that, but it's one of the ones I'm most proud about because it's pretty typical how those conversations start. Again, back to what I mentioned before about the vanity metrics and just opening up people's eyes to the possibilities of thinking about it in a different way.
Yeah, that is a fantastic example, and I like how we transitioned there because when you were first talking about changing perspectives and that sort of thing, I think some of the marketers listening might have started to get a little bit nervous when you start, trying to get them away from brand awareness. A lot of folks understand that it's important, but they put too much stock in brand awareness as we were talking about, right? They're following, engagement rates and vanity metrics too much. So here's an example of how it can work if done right. So, what are some of the first steps then that some of the marketers listening should take to try to shift their social strategy now towards revenue generation, like what you're talking about?
Yeah, and to be fully transparent, this took me even some time to kind of get over because I was always, I went to college for marketing and I learned about how important it is for brand awareness. And I'm not at all, poo pooing brand awareness. It's very, very important, especially from a thought leadership side. But I kind of already alluded to that. The step number one, I spend a lot of time, with our clients helping from a mind shift, shifting the mindset perspective. And so one of the things I would often talk about if I'm especially working with just the marketing departments is getting the marketing team to think like sales. So, instead of again, how can we, broaden, our brand awareness, instead is if we produce this, marketing asset like a content piece, how is it going to help move the lead to generate a conversation? And so that really, I think, is the biggest step that I worked through. And again, obviously, the sales team loves it when I talk like that. But the marketing team, I think it's a little hard because if they've always living in that marketing silo and had no one ever kind of in a sales mindset, giving them that perspective, it's really challenging. Luckily for me, I worked for a very large computer company distributor early on in my career. And I got really close with the VP of sales there. And he's the one that, shook me hard and made me realize my only job as a marketer is to help generate opportunities for his team. And that really at first took me back by surprise, a little offensive, it felt like. But then I'm like, wow, that's a really good point of view. So then once you have that in place, I just want to share a couple other things real quickly. Is that once you have that mindset, thought about differently, then again, there I alluded to that. It's all about, the ideal client profile. And then think about it from the buyer, buying triggers perspective. So you're thinking about, who the ideal client is, and then what social behaviors will indicate or imply, buying intent. Now, again, here, obviously, marketers are pretty good at this where they aren't too cutthroat. When they see the opportunity, they don't immediately jump in and say, let's get on a demo and I'll sell you my stuff. But they do a pretty good job of thinking about it from a relationship perspective. And then from there, tracking the lead and warming them up and then providing for the sales team, sales ready content. So they actually then could do some really smart follow-ups with those leads and again, just nurturing the opportunities there. So those are a couple of the steps that I kind of start with. I have a ton more after that, but I think those are kind of like, a good way to get the process started around, how marketing teams can really shift their focus around the revenue generation side.
The mindset shift is huge, but I also loved your point about how your VP of sales came to you and shook you. Maybe not physically, but
He actually physically did it. It was hysterical.
existentially. Yeah. Right. So what that means to me is you had some actual conversation and interaction with sales, and the organizations that I've seen, that's a recurring issue where there is no interaction. Those teams, the sales and marketing teams, are siloed. In fact, here at Agorapulse, we struggled with that over the past few years, and we've now merged sales and marketing into one revenue team to try to address that lack of communication, that lack of a bridge for between those two organizations. How would you recommend then for the marketers listening today who want to create and build that bridge to sales? Where should they get started?
Yeah, I probably have been in these conversations hundreds of times. And unfortunately I've been brought in when things are a little heated.
Yeah.
Again, I don't understand why this is still today a common problem. And I'm really impressed. I want to look further into what you talked about your organization and how you did that. That's quite impressive and not very common. But I think for me is, stop doing the finger pointing thing. And I think one to your question, the opportunity that I've seen work the best for marketing people is speaking in sales language. So again, my experience, regardless of the type of company we work with on the B2B side, is the sales team can care less about reach, and like the vanity
Yeah.
things I talked about before. All they care about is revenue. So, what I typically would recommend for the marketing people that are open to really wanting to improve this relationship with their sales department is show them that you have their back. And so typically I would recommend to the marketing people, look, not only would we benefit to hear from you to help do, our job to support you all on the demand generation and whatnot, but also for your benefit and your relationship internally, maybe meet with the sales team and be like, hey, what's your biggest frustration with marketing? And then my advice would be is if you are open to that and you actually hear things that have legitimate opportunities, before you do anything else, fix that first. Because what I have found is the larger the organizations that we work with, if there's been years of this finger pointing, internal nonsense, which is unfortunately is very common, there obviously is a lack of trust. And the sales team is constantly complaining about marketing not driving them leads, and the marketing team is complaining about sales not handling the leads, and so on and so forth. And so, if the marketing team could own the responsibility to, you know, start improving that level of trust by fixing the things that are preventing them from doing their best job, that could be huge. And then I think once you have that in place, then I think is showing them and proving the value that actually social media can make them money. And so I mentioned that example with our client of ours. It was interesting. The sales team there didn't really have a lot of insight into LinkedIn. They all had profiles, but they all were like, they still thought about LinkedIn being a recruiting platform, for finding a job. Now they get the value that their clients were on there, but they didn't know how to really use it. And so they just didn't know what they didn't know. So they didn't do anything with it. And so I think again there, if marketing team members could show hungry sales department team members where there's like, oh, here's a LinkedIn conversation we had, and here's how you can kind of take it from there. Then they're like, wow, now I kind of can see the value of this, and I'm like also can see the value in why we even have a marketing department. Because I'm not sure if you've heard that, but I've had unfortunately too many conversations with sales leaders that are like, I don't even know why we even have a marketing department. They don't do anything, and it kills me when I hear stuff like that because I know obviously behind the scenes those people are doing a ton, they just don't know how to present what they're doing to deliver value from the sales team's perspective. So I would just say again, I'm trying to keep this brief. Those are I think two initial steps. You can do a ton more there on, making it, the whole kiss and making it, silly stupid, around that as far as automating some of this stuff. But I think if you just start with again showing them you're on your side, and then proving to them how social media could be of value in helping their leads, I think that could be a great way to kind of bridge that gap.
I'm sure many of the folks listening are nodding their heads. They've heard from their sales departments, a lot of things that you're talking about. They've probably said some things about their sales team that we haven't really brought up. Oh, sales isn't closing the leads I'm giving them. Look at their, 10% closure rate. That's crap, and so on. And to your point, there's a lot of that finger pointing then that's going on. And I think that's what's really interesting to me is what we aren't talking about. You didn't come on here and say, look, if you want to drive more leads, then it means you need to launch another campaign next month, do 2 more webinars next month. We're not talking about those tactics. Instead, what we're talking about are really core fundamental concepts like communication and building relationships. Marketers were great at communication relationships, but it's often pointed externally. And what I hear you saying, Jay, is we need to point that superpower internally as much as externally and build relationships with our sales team, with our product team, with our C-suite. It's because one of the things that I've heard over and over again, not just from you, but from many of the guests on this show, is that marketers need to speak the language of dot dot dot. If we're talking to the sales team, we need to speak in their language. If we're talking to the C-suite, we need to be able to say things in a way that the CFOs can understand if we want to get our budget approved for next quarter. Like, same thing. Don't talk to the CFO about reach and engagement because they don't care about that either. They care about that
Hmm.
bottom line. So I'm wondering what are some of the specific metrics that you think marketing teams should be tracking to actually try to measure the revenue impact specifically of their social media efforts? I mean, obviously, content marketing and some of the other things that we're doing as marketers have different metrics, but what about social media specifically?
Yeah, I love this question. Because even if I got that question from a client, I'm already excited because it means that they're seeing the opportunity there. Um, so uh, I am a big fan of not having, dashboards have 20,000 different things on it. I love the idea of having the KPIs, the key performance indicators, focusing on just a handful of items per department. And so there are about five that we have found to really help, really marketing, sales, and the leadership team that are, wanting to know where things are at. So let me kind of just briefly share those. So the first one, obviously, I already kind of alluded to this one, is that social source pipeline. And so again, here, focusing on the social media side, because obviously, as we all know, it's very time consuming to do this. And I just unfortunately I've seen too many executives want to give up on social media too fast because they just feel like it's taken too long. And so I feel like here having a pipeline to attribute back opportunities to social media, I think that could be huge. Then I think the second part there is from a influence perspective is which social media or social opportunities influence the deal. So you look at kind of close one where social played a role in warming up that lead. And so again there what we have found is that when you're looking at like first step attribution versus last step attribution, I think the world that we're living in the last couple of years especially, things have changed so much and it's really hard to be like, ooh, Google ads or LinkedIn ads got us all of our stuff. Let's just put all of our emphasis, energy, and budget there. What we're finding is that social media is playing a massive role in helping push down opportunities when often the deal didn't originally originate from social media. So again, that's another area that we want to think about is when you're seeing engagement happening with things like LinkedIn, you want to make sure that you're somehow attributing that opportunity that close that came from, let's say, a LinkedIn ad or a Google ad, back to how social media benefited you. Which then on the third side is looking at it from a connection to conversation rate. So again, I mentioned before, I'm not big into the whole followers part, but this is where I'm thinking it's a little bit different. I'm not saying it's all about like getting you more connections, but more about what percentage of those new connections actually turn into a sales conversation. Because that's where I think it's super exciting is taking that vanity metric and going one step deeper from a sales side. And then the last two, are ones that I'm not seeing being used very often. So maybe this could be a kind of a phase two. But I just want to share that one of the opportunities could be is the direct messages, things like on LinkedIn, how many of those convert into a demo? So again, here you want to think about it from that step perspective is I know a lot of organizations like to get the LinkedIn connection and then immediately move over into email. And I'm seeing obviously based upon the industry and the comfort level their ideal client has with LinkedIn, there is opportunity where it makes sense to be looking at measuring, the messages to book sales calls and then last but not least is the acceleration of the sales cycle. So then, tied to that second thing I mentioned, how much faster those deals close when social media was involved. And where I find this to be huge value is it allows the marketing team to help validate with their leadership team. I know that we're spending a lot of time and money with our organization on the marketing side and now also the sales side on leveraging tools like LinkedIn, but look how it generated X, Y, and Z. And if I think if you could speak to the revenue side to help the executives understand that there is a benefit to this, it just unfortunately does take some time to nurture it. That'll then give them the confidence that this is worth the effort to allow our team to invest the time and energy into this.
That is fascinating. One quick follow-up question, because we talked about the social pipeline. Are you including paid and organic, or how are you differentiating between those 2 different channels when you talk about social pipeline?
Yeah, so and I'll just focus on LinkedIn because obviously it's the easiest one, especially in the world that we live in. We do measure our organic versus paid. So, again, for us, typically, writing a post, at engaging in a group, whatever it might be, anything from around that would be on the organic side, and we're tracking that. And then we do handle the paid side a bit different. Typically, how we would recommend to our clients to nurture a paid lead is actually quite different than the organic side. Because as we all know, a lot of people are getting smarter and smarter to know that, okay, I clicked on this via an ad. And so now I know I'm going to be sold to. And we have found, especially in the B2B side, that people's guards are up a little higher if the lead came from paid. And so, what we typically would do for our clients on like the workflow side and think about processes, is we would actually handle the flow a bit different on the paid side, just to kind of try to increase the level of earned trust. Whereas on the organic side, they chose to come in and like the engagement, and we don't find that barrier to be as hard to overcome.
Got it. Yep, that makes sense. Smart approach, folks. We're talking with Jay Feitlinger about the importance of prioritizing social media's place in the revenue team. And I've got several more questions you can't miss. But first, let me share with you the tool that you're going to need to track your success?
Actually can't say enough great things about the reporting with Agora Pulse. I feel like that is my job security every month. My clients aren't that active on social media, which is why they have me manage their profiles for them. And when they get that report, it verifies that they're making a good investment.
The metrics downloads are so simple and easy to read, and it really helps me show where we are doing things right on social and where we need to improve.
So I think one of the main reasons why we decided to move to Agora Pulse is because it's a more comprehensive, integrated tool for all of our marketing needs. So rather than what we have had to do historically with Sprout, which is use certain parts of that platform that work really well and then supplement it with other outside tools, by moving to Agora Pulse, we were able to keep all of that into one technology platform, which is not only a time saver, but it also makes sure that our analytics and all of our reporting's on point because we're pulling all from the same source.
It's a really great platform for agencies. It makes it really easy to manage, but gives me really, really, really robust information that actually helps me develop better strategies for my clients and better plans of action.
So Jay, when you were talking a moment ago about like LinkedIn direct messages and engaging in groups, it sounds to me like you're focusing on LinkedIn profiles versus company pages. So I'm just kind of wondering from a technical perspective, how are you connecting those dots and measuring the impact, the business impact of social media, particularly when again, it sounds like you're using a lot of LinkedIn profiles.
Yeah, so, again, it does depend a little bit on the client and their goals and objectives they have in place, but typically what we would do is, once we have clarity and buy-off from everyone, marketing, sales, leadership, our team, etcetera, on the ideal client profile, we then would investigate what organizations then would match that, almost kinda like a dream client list. For those that are familiar with account-based marketing, we take that very seriously with our team because we have found either for people getting promotions or changing jobs, it's super sad to me when I see one of our clients working with only one contact at an organization that's they're considering a dream client. That person leaves or whatever might happen, and then all of a sudden they're starting back from ground zero. And so what we basically typically do then is okay, let's identify the companies that we feel have a pain point, a motivation, a need for our client's offering. Once we have that in place, then what we'll do is we'll leverage on the company page all the key people that fit the role where we can, again, have our client best serve. And so with that, I think it's a little bit similar to what I kind of talked about with the last question, but one level deeper is once we identify the ideal clients, the dream clients, and we call those maybe like the key accounts they want to go after, we will actually recommend having a separate monitoring of the interactions with those people. Because typically, again, some of those dream clients might take an extra 6 to 18 months to close because they require a lot more nurturing. And so leveraging like an account-based, marketing kind of a strategy, engaging with the various different contacts there, and then seeing how that's all helping you develop an opportunity. That's I think a really big one that ties in what we kind of talked about a little bit before. And then, this one's kind of a silly one, but I'm seeing this happening a lot is depending upon the CRM system they're using and a reporting system. I'm pretty amazed at the disconnect often companies have where, they have one system from monitoring their opportunities like a HubSpot. We're a HubSpot partner, so we do a lot of work with HubSpot. But if you don't connect the dots between you making the posts and the opportunity, and you don't have any kind of like tracking in place, then I think you're going to not understand what's working, what's not. So, for example, we do a lot of A/B testing with our clients on the social content side, and so often what we'll do is we'll add very unique UTM like tracking per content piece that works with whatever platform we're using to help them monitor results. And so what we'll say there is, okay, let's look at the last 12 months, look at the last, I don't know, 500 posts we did in the last 12 months compared to the key accounts versus the non-key accounts. and seeing, what content is creating the best engagements and opportunities. And then obviously then double downing on that, and doing more of the things that are working well. But I think just doing the spray and pray, which unfortunately we're seeing a lot of organizations doing, and then the inconsistency of like for 1 month they're excited about it, and then they spend, every day writing a post, and then the next month it's like, nothing. And so obviously again, it really requires a strategy, understand what you're doing and why, and then making sure you're coming back and tracking the performance so you can do a better job in enhancing what's working and then stop doing what's not.
I love that multi-threaded ABM approach. That's definitely a way to go, particularly in this B2B environment. Long sales cycles, to your point, you've got folks coming and going, particularly in this technology, this time frame that we're at in terms of workforce. There's a lot of movement going on. So you can't trust that the person you're investing so much time in building a relationship with is going to be with the company in 6 months. And this is a good point for me to interject. By the way, folks, if you're listening and you're not using Agorapulse, we'll automatically add all those UTM parameters that Jay was just talking about on every link shared, even if it's an individual personal LinkedIn profile that you've got in the system and you're using that to send direct messages or leave comments. All that tracking is going to be there by default. So definitely check that out. I'm wondering, Jay, though, if there are any specific pitfalls or challenges that you've seen companies encounter that we haven't already talked about when they're making this transition. You talked about spray and pray, and we definitely don't want to do that. We want a strategy with our social media. What else should they be looking out for?
Oh gosh, this alone could be an hour discussion. Let me just maybe share a couple of the ones that I'm seeing happening very often. So I'm going to assume at this point the organization sees a value in leveraging social media for the sales team. And so one of the things that I'm noticing, unfortunately, happening too frequently, it's actually happened to me yesterday with one of our clients, is the sales team's like, look, we're too busy to do um, social media stuff. So we're just gonna, pass that torch, baton over to the marketing team and they'll do it for us. And so in theory, there is some opportunity there. I think where marketing could definitely play a role, especially with, content and topics and trends and all that kind of stuff. But where I see a huge misstep is when marketing is trying to own the social selling. Sales has to be involved in those conversations based upon, you know, what they're finding is working well and not, and then being more agile around having those conversations. Marketing people aren't naturally wired and or responsible for, taking the opportunity and pushing it down the funnel. That's the job of sales. And so I would recommend before you just have the marketing team being responsible for all of this and becoming basically part of sales, there needs to be a roles and responsibilities conversation of, good to great, Collins, as far as like the right seat person, the right seat in the bus. So I do feel like that's really important. The second one I do want to share, which I already kind of talked about, is again measuring the wrong stuff. And so when we talk with like our VPs of marketing or CMOs at our clients, and they're still focusing heavily on engagement growth as like the main success metric, in a an appropriate way, we basically make them aware that they're missing the point. And so obviously fixing that. Then number three, I also alluded to a little bit is I don't understand why this is still going on in today's day and age, but expecting immediate results. The social selling side is a relationship play. It's not a quick hit, Google ad or LinkedIn ad campaign. You have to think about it similar to if you go into a networking event. Treat it exactly the same way. Obviously, I know you get this of all people, but put that perspective in place where you want to think about it from a networking point of view, and you have to just naturally or appropriately handle that. And then I think, two others real fast to share. One is on the sales side, they're treating social like it's a cold email process. We have had, unfortunately, a couple recent situations where we show the sales team the power of this so they can kind of own the social selling. They get a bit too aggressive with it, and then start just completely spamming, their contacts. And as we know, doing that on the DM side, it really kills the trust. We had an example where one of the sales leader forwarded our team a screenshot of a situation where one of their dream clients responded back to one of their salespeople with a very negative comment, and they showed us why. There was like 6 or 7 very aggressive, spammy DMs with never a one engagement from that contact. And basically, our client was like, "How can we fix this?" And I'm like, "The damage is done. Like, let's
Yeah.
learn from it and move on." And then I think with that, which ties into it, we've got to produce training and best practices, especially with LinkedIn. Just because a salesperson or leader has a LinkedIn profile, like you alluded to maybe 15 minutes ago, it doesn't mean they know how to use it to sell. And so we spent a lot of time. Our organization changed a ton about 4 years ago. We realized we keep on talking about sales, but we aren't helping the sales team. We're helping the marketing team, then help the sales team. And the marketing teams are like, "This is too much for us. We don't understand how to explain this." And our team has a very good sales mind in place, and so typically we'll build out, you know, um, LinkedIn audits and LinkedIn training for their sales leadership and their sales team, so that way they're following the best practices and doing it right, and finding it to be of value to help them as one more channel to help nurture opportunities.
Folks, Jay just gave us 5 really, really solid pieces of advice. I strongly recommend you go back and you listen to that entire segment once more. I was particularly struck by your point, Jay, about relationships, because you're right. My career, my role in particular, has been focused on partnerships and relationships for the majority of that time. So that's second nature to me. Everything I do is all about building long-term relationships, which means I often forget that not everybody else thinks that way. I'm in my own little silo from that perspective. So I appreciate you reinforcing that for my own benefit. I'm definitely going to help my team try to remember that fact. We're talking about LinkedIn, we're talking about social media, which changes all the time. Not as often as AI, but it changes all the time. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of sales folks in particular try to keep it at arm's length, because they're not keeping up. Who do you follow, or what resources would you recommend folks turn to keep up with what's best practices today on platforms like LinkedIn?
Gosh, I have a lot with this one also. Well, I I actually do want to answer with maybe a little bit around the the foundational stuff. Um, Hopefully it's coming clear about how important I feel like that psychology of relationships are. And so what I have found is I spend a lot of time with myself and my team. We actually do like a monthly book club, which I love, and every month we pick a different book and have a conversation about that. But typically, they're very much around understanding psychology, because not only does it help us become better marketers, but also helps us better understand how to help our client sales teams. And so, I have a couple suggestions around this. So, I think first and foremost, the former CRO at HubSpot, he wrote an awesome book called The Sales Acceleration Formula. Mark Roberge, and he's got also a podcast, and I love the kind of the way he presents how to really kind of scale revenue from a kind of a data-driven marketing and sales alignment perspective. And so he's definitely one that I would recommend not only to read his book, but also to follow his content. I find it to be very inspirational. Another one, his approach is unique, but his name is Keenan, and he wrote a book called Gap Selling. And so again, here it's all about like getting into the buyer's head. And then obviously, again, this is an area that I think marketers especially could benefit from. And then Daniel Pink is one that I always is a go-to. He's been on our agency's book club list a few times, but his book "To Sell Is Human," it's one that I just love because again, it kind of helps address the myth around sales only for salespeople. I think this was one of the books that I think got me the most excited with my organization. It was probably pretty pivotal because until probably 4 or 5 years ago, our agency was a typical marketing agency. We did a lot of really good work, very strategic, very much demand generation. But when we started having those conversations with some of our clients' sales leaders and realizing the value we could bring to help their team too, this was one of the books that we read that helped me kind of think about it from a different point of view. So I would say those three people and their books are ones that I would recommend. Obviously, we know on Slack there's a ton of like groups like RevOps, and I'm in way too many of these various different marketing and sales groups. But I wanted just to caution everyone because what I've done disservice to myself and my team sometimes is often I'll just see all these shiny objects and start subscribing and signing on, and it's like drinking out of a fire hose. And so I would just say you got to walk before you run with some of this. And I think that if you could think about it from getting the foundational stuff in place first, with I think these three people, for example, once you feel like you have that under control, you have your marketing and sales team aligned, and everyone's supporting each other, then I would think phase 2, you can start getting into all the other shiny objects with various different Slack groups and LinkedIn groups and just really kind of, double downing on some of this. But again, as you obviously know, there's a lot of content out there, and unfortunately some of it I think is not always the ideal situation because it might make you actually do things in a unhealthy relationship way.
I love the idea of a book club. And of course, we'll research the links, folks, and have those in the show notes for you below so you can check out those three specific examples. But the concept of a book club, not only is it a forcing mechanism for us individually to consume a new piece of information in the form of a book or a podcast or whatever you guys choose to do and learn there, but by doing it as a group, then we're all learning that information. We're all consuming it and then discussing it. Because one of the problems I think as an individual in an organization, I mean, just take me at Agorapulse. We're, I don't know, 175 plus folks from around the world. I can go and read all the books I want. I don't run the company. So if I read a book and it's got some really profound ideas for sales and marketing, I can bring them back to the company. I can recommend them, but it's just one voice. Whereas if you've got your entire team reading that same book, you're studying Simon Sinek or Daniel
Mm.
Pink or somebody else, right? And you all buy into the ideas, at least some of them in that book, then it's so much easier, I think, to implement them as an organization. So I love that. I've literally made a note to start something like that here at Agorapulse. So thanks for sharing that.
I love
Jay,
that.
looking ahead, yeah, absolutely. I love making these notes and learning from these conversations as much as the audience. But looking ahead, how do you see the relationship then between social media and revenue generation? How do you see it evolving in this B2B space?
I got a couple also on this one too. So I already kind of alluded to this one, and it goes again against a little bit what I kind of mentioned earlier on. But what I'm noticing, and I think it's just going to have to change because we're still seeing the problem of that whole sales is here and marketing is here and all the finger pointing stuff. But the line between sales and marketing, I think is going to get very blurry. Um, what I think is going to happen is like the the most innovative or best B2B brands out there, they're gonna have like sales reps or sales leaders acting like thought leaders, and then you're gonna see marketing people driving pipeline. Now, again, I'm not suggesting today the marketing team should be doing the social selling, but something I think is gonna really change there where I think the best marketers are gonna be excited about sales, and they're gonna find really creative ways to support the sales team and vice versa. I would say for our team, uh, our clients' sales teams make our jobs easier because we're constantly hearing from those departments. Here are the common questions and objections and issues we're getting, and I'm like, ooh, our team are like one of our team members are like, that's great content or great lead magnet stuff. So that's one. One that I'm noticing, obviously huge since obviously ChatGPT became mainstream, is AI powered social selling is going to explode. I think that, one day we're going to see that, if you're looking to buy a car, or various different things, you're going to be engaging with an AI system. And so what I'm seeing today is there are a lot of companies out there that already have some pretty impressive products that have been out for, a couple years now where they're taking AI to basically become like sales agents where they're real time looking at buying signals, and then they're basically creating content in the voice of the person, the company, et cetera. So they're on brand to make social selling faster, more targeted. I think, again, a lot of companies use various different platforms to automate some of this. And yes, you can be really smart about making it industry focused and making it very relevant. But the missed opportunities, because it takes so much time, is you know, my client X at my dream clients just posted about this uh, topic, or they're attending an event. And if an AI system is plugged into that, at a minimum, to make you aware of the opportunity could be huge. I think a third one is the owned audience will become actually even more valuable than paid ads. We have clients that are spending, six figures a month on paid ads because it's almost like a drug. But the really smart brands are going to be like, okay, we are noticing the organic side is what's generating us not only the highest quality leads, but also converting the fastest. And so if we can find a way to invest not only in the business brand, but also the personal brands, and not put so much more and more into traditional ad spend, that could be huge. And then the last one, this is a prediction of mine. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I feel like LinkedIn has a significant opportunity to basically become like the new, like a CRM of some sorts. I don't know what they're going to do there, but when we think about a business professional network, it's obviously the go-to, and it's just really challenging on how you're building and nurturing that audience organically, or else you're going to lose those opportunities. And so I think LinkedIn's going to have to do something around, working with you all closer, or there's something going on there that I just feel like they're going to need to think about, because right now, the way the algorithm is set up, it does share with me often really good, relevant content. But because of all of the headaches people have with getting spammed, it's becoming a very negative thing where we have a lot of our clients who are like, our ideal contacts are just so tired of LinkedIn because every day they're getting, hundreds of, just very spammy messages. And so I think there, if LinkedIn can really figure out how to improve not only the algorithm on how they're, providing you content to consume, but they can also find a better way to handle and train people around treating it like a networking opportunity and not a spray and pray platform, as which unfortunately is too frequently happening today. I think that could be a huge opportunity, and one that I'm watching very closely.
I'd agree with that. In fact, I want to underscore, Jay, your point about AI social selling. Folks, that is huge. And do not sleep on X. I know when Elon took over X, marketers, around the world revolted. And I understood why. But one of the key things that happened then that a lot of folks didn't realize, Elon increased the price for access to X's API to the point where it basically shut it off for many, many brands. We've had to spend tens of thousands of dollars a month, whereas before we weren't spending much at all at Agorapulse just to access the X feeds for our clients. The reason for doing that was so that Elon could hoard all that data, and X could hoard all that data and use it to train Grok, which they've now released Grok 3 at the time of our recording here. And with Grok 3, now you have access to all those signals you were talking about a moment ago, Jay, where you can see people posting on X buying signals. And very soon you will be able to have AI agents, Grok powered AI agents that can respond automatically to some of those, have AI powered direct messages and so on. So this is happening very, very rapidly. Those of us who are following the LLMs are seeing Grok develop at an unprecedented rate. I mean, we thought ChatGPT came along quickly. Grok has moved from 0 to 3 in a matter of really just months. So it's really incredible what's happening over there. So folks, yes, definitely pay attention to LinkedIn like we've talked about this entire episode, but also don't sleep on X. But Jay, you've been absolutely amazing. This has been such an
Aw,
important and informative interview. Thank you
thanks, Mike.
so much. For folks who want to learn more from you or reach out, where should they go?
I would say our website, stringcaninteractive.com. I'm also obviously very passionate about LinkedIn, so I would definitely recommend people find me there and connect. I just love having these kind of conversations with, executives and sales and marketing leaders. So I would say those are probably two really good places to start.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jay. Thanks to all of you for listening. That is all the time we've got for today, friends. But don't forget to find the Social Pulse Podcast B2B edition on Apple and drop me a review. I'd love to know what you think. If you're getting value out of these episodes, if there's topics you want us to follow and talk to folks on, let me know. Until next time. Thank you for joining another episode of Social Pulse Podcast B2B Edition, hosted by Mike Alton and powered by Agorapulse, the leading social media management solution. Learn more at agorapulse.com. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and leave us a review. We value your feedback and look forward to bringing you more useful insights.